So as we move along the NBA draft, we get to number 4, the Memphis Grizzlies, a team that has 2 established players, Mike Conley and Marc Gasol, which could impact the way that they go about this draft. I think the first question to ask is how much longer does Marc Gasol have as being a quality NBA player? I mean, he's 33 right now. I believe he turns 34 during next season. And I do think he has the type of game which can age a bit well in terms of his shooting, the fact that he's never really relied on athleticism, and he's a smart player, a very good passer, and he could, maintain himself, and I guess the big question would be his defense, right? But if we assume that Marc Gasol has, 2 more years of being at the level that he's at right now, and then a gradual decline, assuming that maybe he plays 70 games a year and his minutes stay, relatively conservative, then I don't know if going with a center would be the best thing for the Grizzlies. It should be, of course, remembered that one of either Jaren Jackson or Marvin Bagley or potentially even Mo Bamba could be off the board by now, depending on what the Hawks want to do. But if I can talk about those bigs a little bit more, let's say you believe that Mo Bamba is the best player in this draft outside of DeAndre Ayton and Luka Doncic, right? I don't think there's much of a chance that he can play the power forward position, just because his offense is probably not there. Do you want him sitting behind Marc Gasol for a year or 2? Because it seems like Memphis is not going to trade Gasol, given that they're desperate to get people to come to the games because they're a small market. Do you want your star draft pick playing 2 years on the bench? I don't know. I can't see the future in terms of when Marc Gasol is going to decline or whatever, but I think that's something that could influence their decision. I mean, depending on what the Hawks do, Jaren Jackson could be available. I think he has some potential to play the power forward position because his jumper seems a little more far along than Bamba's does. And Jackson's a pretty good athlete, so maybe it would benefit them to go in that direction instead. Get that switchy defender who is similar to JaMychal Green, who's already on the roster, but he's just a bit better, right? He seems like he's more athletic. Seems like he'll have more of an offensive game and that sort of thing. I do think he could fit in pretty okay with Mike Conley as well in terms of being a pick and pop player. And between Jaren Jackson and Marc Gasol, you could actually have a decent amount of spacing, Now, there are some fears about Jackson's rebounding, I believe, where they fear that he just might not have the size in order to box out NBA players all the time. And given that Gasol is not the most natural rebounder either, that could be a problem. But in today's league, with spacing and shooting and athleticism being the main priorities, I think you'd be willing to take the bit of a risk on that one. Now, another interesting player here is Michael Porter Jr. And this is an interesting one because you could make the argument that Memphis, at least for the next couple of seasons, with Marc Gasol and JaMychal Green as your front court, and Mike Conley hopefully not getting injured and all that, you could still be a quality defensive team, right? And if that's the case, then maybe you could afford to go with Michael Porter Jr., someone who is going to be a shooter, can make shots for you, potentially play small ball 4, although his rebounding is also in question, but maybe even a bit more than Jaren Jackson's is. And then, you could just have enough defenders around Porter to where he wouldn't kill your defense, right? I mean, last season, 2017, not 2018. In 2017, Memphis was 7th in defense, and that was with Gasol and Conley playing as close to a full seasons as they can at this point. And then you still had JaMychal Green, who can be a good defensive power forward as well. So you could slot Michael Porter Jr. in at the 3. He could give this team some actual excitement, which is cool. And he could even allow you to have maybe an immediate impact, because he could just give you a bit of a boost on offense, because this team has desperately needed shooting. I mean, the fact that Chandler Parsons has really not been able to play is just killing them. So you get him at the small forward spot, you get a shooter to help out Conley on offense, and you could have some pretty decent spacing at that point between Conley. I don't know where you go with the shooting guard position, but then Porter and JaMychal at least resembles a stretch four sometimes. And then Gasol, that could be a pretty open offense. And then, like, if you compare, once again, that 2017 season where they were 19th in offense, maybe Michael Porter Jr. allows you to creep up to, like, 13th or 12th in offense, you know? And then you can still maintain being a pretty quality defensive team, and suddenly you could be like a 46, 47 win team, which I do think this organization cares about, because once again, they just have such a tough time drawing in money. I mean, even at the peak of the grit and grind Grizzlies, this team was still like nowhere near the top of the NBA in terms of attendance. In fact, they were usually among like the bottom half. So as much money as you possibly can get, you know, and Michael Porter Jr. could end up being one of the more exciting players in this draft because of his scoring ability. That could mean more jersey sales. And we got to remember that NBA owners do care about these things. This isn't just us playing 2K's My League mode, where all we care about is winning a championship. If you're making a profit, then that's a good thing. Now, there is, of course, a risk with Michael Porter Jr. in terms of, number one, injury. Number two, can he be an efficient player? Can he stretch the floor consistently for you? Is he not going to hijack the offense too much? And you're also risking, if you don't go with a defender in this draft, you are risking just like being a defensive disaster without Marc Gasol. Because while I think he can age pretty well, I might be wrong on that one, you know? But, you know, you could also argue that given Porter's size, where he's like 6'7" or something? Oh, he's like 6'10". Yeah, I mean, given his height of 6'10", and the fact that he can move pretty okay, he could grow into at least being a not bad defender just by caring, pretty much. So, you know, you give him some time to grow as a defender, helps out the offense with Conley, and, you know, you could be good. Now, I guess I could bring up Bagley as well. A decent amount of people think he's going to go number 3 to the Hawks, and I talked about what the Hawks could do in yesterday's vid, but yeah, I mean, Bagley, you know, actually slotting him at the power forward position, whether it's coming off the bench or whatever, could actually really help him with his defense, because he could play with Gasol, and then you could probably move him over to center, and then have him play with JaMychal Green as well. So you could have Bagley playing with one good defensive big pretty much all the time, which could help him out. And the athleticism that you could have with JaMychal Green and Bagley could be something that's difficult for some teams to deal with. So I think there's some value in going with Bagley. I think he could also be a really good pick and roll option with Mike Conley as well. This, of course, assumes that the Hawks don't select him, and they very well could. So yeah, I think Memphis, they are in an interesting spot, because usually teams that are this high in the draft don't have 2 really good players and then a really good role player as well. But because they have all these things, and because the reason why they were so bad this previous season was mainly because Mike Conley only played 12 games, we could see a drastic improvement where they go from their 22 wins up to like mid-40s in one season, you know? Especially if this draft pick ends up being really good for them. So I do think Memphis has this window here where they could be a pretty exciting team, not a title contender, but a good one nonetheless, make the postseason, at the very most get to the second round, but I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world. And depending on how good this draft pick is, you could have future aspirations that are really good as well. So while it was a rough season for Memphis, I think some okay things are in store for them, depending on if they nail it with this pick. So I think that'll do it for me. I guess if they wanted to, they could just go with Mikal Bridges and get that 3-and-D player, but I think you have to go for a bit more of a higher ceiling than Bridges, even if he could end up being a safer pick than someone like a Michael Porter Jr. But anyway, I'm done.